That way everybody will know what we're doing here, talking about TABE and TABE Tutor. Tell me when you want me to go ahead and get started, kiddo.
All right, well, I will go ahead and introduce you and read your bio, and then I will let you and Deanna get started.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm welcoming my alter ego, the other Christina Miller, today. She is here from Paxen. She has worked for over 30 years in adult education. She was a program director, serving over 2,000 students annually. She served on the state level for a time, developing and implementing professional development programs statewide, and is now working as a national consultant for Paxen Steck-Vaughn, providing training workshops, conducting national webinars, and presenting at state and national conferences. And she also has Deanna with her. Go ahead and get started, ladies.
Okay, thank you so much, Christina. And I like that, my alter ego. So this is great. And it has been wonderful. I was in Ohio last year face to face, and it was such a wonderful experience. Y'all are great up there and doing a wonderful job with adult ed. So I just wanted to say thanks for letting me come back this year, even though it is virtually. You know, we're gonna make it through all of this, and I'll be glad when we do. I'll be glad when it's over with. But I also wanted to ask Deanna Crossan to she's my alter ego too, so I'd like to welcome her and ask her to say a few words to get us started.
Thank you, Chris. My name's Deanna Crossan. I'm the National Sales Director for Aztec Software and Paxen Publishing. I want to welcome you to today's presentation, Solving TABE 11 and 12 with Targeted Instruction. Before I turn the mic over to Chris, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that earlier this year, Paxen Publishing and Aztec Software joined forces. And our two companies have had the same driving mission for many, many years, and that is to provide quality educational materials for adult learners. So we're excited now to be able to offer the most comprehensive selection of adult education materials available. Our commitment and our dedication to adult education programs, to the students, to the teachers, to the directors will continue. We want to support them in every way we possibly can. And this by joining forces is going to allow us to support everyone more than we ever have before. So we're very excited about that. We would like to continue the conversation. So after Chris does her presentation, if you have any additional questions, you'd like to talk to someone from Paxen Publishing or Aztec, we will be happy to talk with you and learn more about your program and tell you more about what we have to do. So now I'm going to be quiet and let Christina Miller, who's the expert on all things TABE, present to you today. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Deanna. All things TABE, and that's what we're all here for, right? Because it is curious that TABE that we know now, the 11-12, is so different from what we experienced in 9-10. And we're going to talk about why it's different today. So we're going to talk about standards. We are not, I promise you, don't log off because you think we're talking standards. We are just going to touch on standards, and we're going to talk about targeted instruction that really pinpoints those areas that our adult students need. And then we're going to talk about post-testing, because without the post-testing, and I really want to talk about how to be strategic with it, you're not going to see the level-to-level gains that you might be able if you do the strategic piece. So we'll talk about that toward the end too. But what I really wanted to do is to start off right now with understanding why we have the standards, and understand that standards are not only now within the GED test, actually all of them. It's within the high set and the task. All of our high school exams share the standards that we've grown to love, but the TABE 11-12 is now based on the standards, and all of this comes as a result of WIOA and our Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act, which is our guiding legislation. I hope all of you have had a chance to study it a little bit and to become familiar with the different pieces of WIOA, because it is our legislation, and it gives us what we're supposed to do on national, state level, but also on the local level too. So with that, we're going to talk about how WIOA has brought about this national standards-based education movement. And that really is what has changed our lives, because if we expect to put ourselves out there as a high school equivalency program, and we know that the high schools have the college Common Core as a backdrop, then we need to have what are called now the college and career readiness standards. So that's what this test is based on. This is what your curriculum needs to be based on, because we're both moving toward that end objective so that we can get our outcome for that test. These standards, though, will help us, and the intent is to communicate clearer expectations for our students so that they have a good understanding of what they're doing each time we open the textbook or have a meeting with them. We also need to use those standards to improve our curriculum, which in turn will improve our instruction. So those are some intended outcomes of this standards-based movement, and to do what we're doing today, to create professional development programs so that we can, as experts in the field, be able to deliver those standards and implement those in a appropriate and professional way. Now, this is a slide that I want you to either take a screenshot of, or while I'm talking, write down that link in the very middle of the page. It's if you can't, just write down College and Career Readiness Standards for Adult Ed. That will get you there. The publication is important because it will give you everything you need to know about the college and career readiness standards. We're going to talk about key shifts in a few minutes, and it will give you a deeper understanding of those key shifts. We're going to talk about them a little bit today and why they're important to develop, but they are in this publication. And like I said, this all came about, the Adult Ed College and Career Readiness, because K-12 had the Common Core. Now, I know different states did their own standards, but all of them are pretty much based on Common Core. Maybe a little twist and wiggles through there, but we all have the standards. Now, we know that, like I said, not only the TABE 11-12, but also the GED, HiSET, and TASC are all built on these college and career readiness standards. So that's was the intent through WIOA, to at least have an assessment that did target the skills that we needed to know from this new test. New, it was 2014 when the new GED came about, but still it was a different kind of test. Now, I said we're going to talk just briefly about the standards, and there are 3 in math and there's 3 in the ELA. To start off with the math, the first one we're going to talk about is focus. Within focus, the intent is for us to really help our students have a deeper understanding of those standards so that they can have a better way to understand them when they get to the next level. You know that old adage, an inch deep and a mile wide? Well, that's what we have used in the past to teach some of these skills. Now we need to use the opposite of that, to go deeper in the understanding so that our students recognize that skill as they go through the levels, which brings us to coherence. You know, once our students are initially exposed to one skill, and then in the next level, it's compounded, and you have a deeper dive into that skill, and you expand the understanding. You need to make sure that the student understands that skill well enough that they have that focus, that you have focused on that skill deeply enough that the students don't see it as a brand new skill in the next level. So you have that coherence. Now, I often say this to groups, but I want to say it to you too. Have you ever had a student that came back from testing and said, there was nothing on that test that we worked on in class, that you showed me how to work in class? You know, now I hope I'm hearing several of you affirm that and kind of giggle about it, because I think most adult ed instructors have had that experience at one time or another. I have, when I was in the classroom. But what the problem was, when I finally figured all this out, it was like, okay, I didn't teach that skill to the students' understanding where they could apply it. So it's the application of that skill which is critical when we're teaching all these skills that the students need to understand and be able to be proficient with. You think about that. If you teach a skill in the classroom, the student gets it. They can do those fractions. They could do ratio and proportion. But when it came to them on a testing situation, they looked at it like they've never seen it before. And it's because we needed to be better at teaching that application. And along with that comes, with the coherence, comes the ability for students to do things in a more rapid way. We need to have the fluency. It's just like learning a new language. If you're learning a language, you understand that language and you're good at it, you're going to have not only the vocabulary and the understanding of that language, but you're going to be able to be fluent. We need to make sure that our students are fluent in their math as they approach different problems. So that's a big thing within the math. And the last one is rigor. Now, I always thought that rigor just meant for us to make it harder for the students, to give them harder problems and to pile on that homework, and that is not what it means. Rigor in the context of the key shifts is the ability of us, instructors, to know each student well enough that we know what it's going to take to challenge that student. So the individualization that we know in adult ed is put forth with every student so that you can challenge them with material that will bring them to the next level. So that's what rigor is intended to be within this standards movement. Now let's talk about the ELA. And the first one is complexity. And I think that those of you that have been around for a while that were with the 9-10 test and now moved to the 11-12, you understand that it is a lot more complex. But as we look at the English language arts section, we need to look at complexity, especially in terms of reading. We are not simply putting our students into reading material that's a paragraph long anymore. It's now called passages because it's multiple paragraphs. So what we have is not only the complexity in the length, but the complexity in maybe the nuances that are within that reading section. And also vocabulary. So all of that ties together so that we need to make sure that as we move our students through the different levels, that we give them challenging material to read and actually work with the source texts that we know that will challenge them, because we know that when they get to the ultimate test, when they get to that GED, they're going to have two source texts. One could be a Winston Churchill speech, one of them could be a John F. Kennedy speech, and the students are going to be asked to write to a prompt that's related to both of those texts, which brings us to evidence. Once they have taken a stance answering a question, we're going to look at this a little bit more detail too. Evidence is pulled into a lot of things that our students are having to do now. Evidence in answering a single question, evidence in writing a response to a prompt. So the ability of a student to be able to pick out the evidence that supports their stance on a particular question or passage is really important, because that's not a skill that our students necessarily come to us with. But the evidence needs to be, they need to be taught how to find that evidence and be able to substantiate what they're reading and what they're writing with the evidence. And the next is knowledge. When I was teaching, I would tell the students, okay, read the question first, Then look at the key words in that question, go into the passage, find those keywords, and there somewhere you're going to find the answer to that question. We didn't have to teach a lot of background knowledge. We had to teach background knowledge, of course, in the different subject areas, but not as much as is required now. So be sure that within the science, the social studies, the literature, even now with informational text, which we know there's more informational text than there is literary now, the students are going to have to be able to have more knowledge coming into the test, and even when they take that post-test in TABE. So why did it change? Let's look at, I'm going to show you two slides now that really made an impact on me, because it really brought the clarity of how this test has changed. If you see at the very top, it talks about this is the NRS Level 1 Math. Right under the very title, look right here that's outlined in blue. There is a one-sentence descriptor. Now, who developed that descriptor? It was OCTAE, our federal office, working in conjunction with the NRS group. So what they did is they had a descriptor on which all of this level was developed, all the test questions, all the outcomes. And if you look at this one, the old descriptor just says, individual has little or no recognition of single-digit counting skills, or may have only minimal skills, such as the ability to, think about this, just to add or subtract single-digit numbers. That's what NRS Level 1 Math included. Now look at the rest of it, the new part. What we have now, students are going to have to be able to reason. They're going to have to be able to apply, strategically select, analyze, and compare, organize, represent, and interpret. Now you think about those critical level thinking skills and think about your level 1 learners. So now when they do the pre-test in TABE 11-12, they're not expecting this, and neither were we at first. But now that we know that this test was built on all these descriptors, we know now how to target some of that instruction so that we're better able to help our students within these levels. Now, I'm not going to read all of it in the old. You can see that for yourself. This is NRS Level 5 Reading, and it talks about the student's ability to analyze the cumulative impact of specific word choices on meaning and tone, to be able to analyze the development of central ideas over the course of the text, and to explain how they are refined by particular sentences, paragraphs. They're going to be expected to follow complex multi-step directions and procedures. And there it is, to cite strong and thorough textual evidence. We're going to talk about evidence several times because it is one of the most important skills you can pass on to your students on how to find that evidence and be able to cite it. There are some other things that are important about this new TABE 11-12. And that is the way the students answer questions. Now, as you see on the screen, you have EBSR at the very top. That stands for Evidence-Based Selected Response. You know, prior to this 11-12 series of tests, it was always that our students just had multiple choice. That means that it was selected response. That's what multiple choice is, selected response. But now that we've talked about evidence several times, you need to know that the way the students answer, and if you look down here at this column, you see that up at the top, you've got the different issues, but down on this left-hand column, you've got the different levels of TABE 11-12. This is math, this is reading, and this is language. And you see that this EBSR, the evidence-based selected response, are only found in the reading. It goes progressively higher as you go through the levels. Level 3 is only going to have about 3 of these, all the way up to 15 in level A. We're going to look at an example or a couple of examples as we go through. This is technology enhanced. That means that the students, if you're doing the computer-based, students are going to have to know how to manipulate the computer, the mouse, to address hotspot issues and drag and drops. So you're going to have to teach those students that don't have those skills how to drag and drop and to hit hotspots. You see that the technology enhanced are in all three of the subjects: the math, the reading, and the language. Now, as we go through, I'm going to show you some examples. This is simply multiple choice. This is what we've been used to. And of course, they're still going to have the multiple choice. But as you look at the scroll that I've put over to the right, they're also going to have to answer multiple answer questions. So they're going to have to be able not just to pick one answer, but maybe 2 or 3 answers for a particular question. They're going to have to know how to do the fill in the blank, the matching, the drag and drops. And then here's an example of what they're going to do with the evidence-based selected response. You see, part A in question 7 talks about which of these is the main idea of the article. Okay, the student would answer that question. Then part B is the evidence-based part. Which sentence from the article best supports the answer to part A? So now the students are going to have to select an answer, but also be able to answer in terms of why that was the correct answer. So that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about the evidence-based selected response. If your students have never had that before, think about what an advantage they're going to have once they get into your classroom. You explain this concept to them, give them a lot of practice in answering questions in this manner, and then when they do the post test, they're going to do much better. This is an example. This was a hard copy of the drag and drop and the hotspot, and number 4, the one where the print is over it. Your student would need to click on a hotspot. So they're going to have to know how to get their cursor right over that hotspot and click on it to identify that as a hotspot. This is actually an example from the GED math test of dragging and dropping right down here. The student would have to click and hold on that and drag it up to the answer box. So these are examples of the technology enhanced items that you're going to need to work with your students on. Now, very quickly, we're just going to go over, I've got 3 of these. This is the content areas for reading. We're going to go through math and language too. But I want you to notice that you see that across the top, there's literacy level, and these are the TABE levels, E, M, D, and A. You can find this at tabetest.com. Go ahead and write that down. If you haven't been to that website, it is a great source of information. So TABE test, all lowercase, one word, tabetest.com. You'll see that phonics is only taught, or phonetical awareness only in the literacy level, which makes sense. They've got to know the sounds with those letters, uppercase and lowercase. So that is only taught and only tested in that literacy level. For phonics and word recognition, if you have a student that tests into E level, you know that you're going to have to address this skill. For the other 3 that are in the reading section, key ideas and details, craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas, you're going to see that that is tested over in each one of the levels. So those are 3 skills that you're going to need to really, and what it's called actually is spiral curriculum, so that it's taught in one level, and as you progress through the levels, the information about that skill is made more extensive, a deeper understanding, and then by the time they get to A level, they would have a complete understanding of that skill. So it's taught incrementally across the skill levels, but you can see from these charts exactly what skills you're going to need to cover. This is an example from the practice test of TABE 11-12 because I wanted you to see what a reading practice item looked like. You can go to tabetest.com and take this practice test in its entirety for each level and each subject. So this is a real good way even to get your students to practice. But as you see, this one says, how does the author advance his or her point of view in the article? Now look down at the part B. Which sentence from the article best supports? So here again, we're having to cite evidence. So again, it is a critical skill that you need to teach your students. And this is the way they're going to see it on TABE 11-12. Now to go into the math, you can see those skills that are taught in the lower levels, L, E, and M. You've got geometry that again is taught across all levels, and you have the upper level skills all the way through statistics, functions, algebra, all the way through and including the geometry in those levels. Now just put this screen together so that you could see this is from the blueprints. The blueprints we're going to look at in just a minute. They are also found at tabetest.com. And the blueprints give you the information, the standards from which every test question was built within each level. Each subject in each level has its own blueprint. And we'll look at what one looks like. This is an excerpt. And I took this from geometry that you could see. Level E is everything in geometry that's covered in grade equivalencies 2 and 3. When you get into M level, you're talking about levels 4 and 5, even into the lower end of 6. Then level D is going to start with 7th and 8th grade information and sometimes the upper level of 6. And then A level is going to have everything 9 through 12. So here you have the progression of skills from one level to the next following one subject. This I wanted to show you that you can go through this spiral curriculum, and it's really an interesting concept. You might not have known the name of it, but you've probably done this for years. It simply is where you move from a simple explanation of the skill in one level, and then you really go into deeper explanation and target that skill in the other levels to where by the end of the time that the student has moved from one level to the highest level, they have a complete understanding of that skill. You can see that it moves from deeper levels all the way up, from simple to complex, and it really is something that is used in TABE 11-12 and in the TABE Tutor curriculum that we're going to look at in just a minute. Here we have the language, which is interesting because you've got two subjects, two skill areas that are going to be covered throughout all. It makes sense. Conventions of standard English, it's just your rules of English language, right? We're going to start out teaching those rules of language. Excuse me, capitalizing the first letter, putting punctuation all from the lowest level, L, all the way through the advanced level where your students are going to get a more sophisticated look at grammar skills, and also vocabulary and acquisition. If any of my teachers were here right now and you asked them what subject, I always told them to target and target hard, because I thought it was the most important subject you can teach is vocabulary, because vocabulary carries the student into different levels. And it goes across the subject area. Vocabulary in social studies and science, of course, we know is important, but you think about this. What about math vocabulary? If the students don't know what the word product means, they're not going to know what function to use. So there you have to really get into some specific language for the math, but you see that those two areas go from literacy level all the way through advanced. You also have the knowledge of language that's addressed in level M and D, and then text types and purposes all the way through. And I just wanted to mention now, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat box and we'll look at that at the end. I'll try to leave a few minutes so that we can answer any questions or take any comments from y'all. This is something about vocabulary. This is from the language section of the practice test. But this is another way that they're going to be asking the student to use vocabulary. And this is the word abstain, which can have different meanings. And so they're asking the student, in the context of the sentence they've just read, what does the word abstain mean? So here, your students are going to need to be able to answer questions like that. Okay, we know that we do not have on TABE 1112 anymore grade equivalencies like 6.3 or 7.8. You know, the month and the year and the month are no longer, because the standards aren't cited like that. That's the reason. So it's really going to be on us now to understand these scale scores and be able to know what the range of scale scores is. And we can always use these charts. And again, these charts are conversion charts. This one happens to be reading. Whoops. But they have these conversion charts in math and language also. You see on the very left-hand side, the NRS level is cited. And then in the next column, you have the grade range, which goes all the way through. You can see how they're clustered, 9 through 10, 11 through 12. But then you have the specific breakdown of each grade equivalency. So if your student scored, let's say in reading, a 540, that falls within this grade range right here. So your student would be reading on about a 6th grade equivalency. So these charts are important. Some of you may have already memorized all these scale scores, which is probably the way we're going to have to start working on this and understanding the levels as they're given to us in scale scores. Okay, the TABE tutor that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. I wanted you to see that everything we've done with TABE tutor, which is a very extensive series, it is equivalent to the TABE 1112 levels. So here you see that, of course, level L is a special level. We do not have a TABE tutor level L, but we do have an entire series that's devoted to these lower skills. These skills end up being K through 1, and you see that level E in TABE 1112 is exactly what we have in TABE tutor level E, which addresses the skills from 2nd and 3rd grade equivalency. You'll see M is equivalent 4 through 6, D is bundled 6 through 8, and A level is again the same TABE 1112 as it is in TABE tutor, which is 9 through 12. This again is, we're going to talk about post-testing here for just a second, but I wanted to make sure that you have a clear understanding. Several states that I've been to didn't know that this chart was available, but it is at tabetest.com. You can find this exact level, and it's a chart that shows you the NRS levels at the top. If you'll just look at with me level for the mathematics, NRS levels 1 through 6, and then TABE levels are listed down on the left-hand column. With each one of these cells, you're going to see that there is a range of scores for the TABE. Now, if we looked at TABE E, and this is math, and say that your student initially tested in this range, say they tested at 319, well, they would fall into NRS level 1. When you post-test that student, you're going to post-test again, of course, in level E, but what you're going to do is when you reach this top level, you can see that there is no place to go. So what the students you will have to do with that student is test in the next TABE level. Jump up to TABE level M, and that's going to get your student into that next TABE NRS level. So if I need to go over that again, type it in the chat box and we'll come back to it. But just know this chart well enough to know that when you run out of scale scores in a particular TABE level, go up to the next TABE level to do your post testing. And then you can see that how the student, it tops out at each level, and you'll have to keep going up and get that student all the way to level 6. This is just the top part. You're probably familiar with this. I just wanted to go over it very quickly. The most important thing is to make sure that you know from the locator which full battery your student took and address that when you're placing them in the curriculum. So here we have all 3 in M level. We're probably not going to see that a lot. You know, your students are probably a lot like the ones I had, and they're going to be stronger in one subject than they are in another. So reading may be M, math may be E, language may be D. So make sure that you know from this printout what level is appropriate for the curriculum that you're going to place the students. The number of points, of course, the total number and the number they obtained, and the items they attempted. Then you have your scale scores listed. And know that if they had a plus sign, then they tested really one level above this. That lets you know that that student's probably needs to be in a D level. It's up to you whether you post test them or not. But a minus means that they tested, you know, below that target level, and you'd probably need to drop down a level. And then if it has an NA in there, that's out of range, and that means that that student tested at least 2 levels, maybe more than that, below that target level. You have the SEM, which is standard error of measurement, and those are the numbers plus and minus your scale score that gives you the range. They do have the NRS level that is attached to that scale score, and on the post test whether your student made a measurable skill gain or not, which is great information. The new thing about this profile sheet is before, remember, it was just mastery and now it's proficiency. So don't ever try to get these numbers to add up either. The questions are weighted on the TABE 11-12 test, so they're never going to add up to the total. And just I hope to save you a little bit of frustration there. You would look at the subjects that your students really scored non-proficiency or partial proficiency in to address their beginning curriculum. This is the great thing, and I know y'all have probably already seen it, but TABE, thank goodness, listened to us, and they gave us more of a detailed information about how our students fared on this test. So you'll have the skills that the student demonstrated the skill mastery of, but then you have the areas of next focus too. And you're going to see that even those students that their performance was proficient, where they have proficiency over here, they're still going to have some areas of next focus. These are going to need to be attended to, but they're also going to be, like with that spiral curriculum, they're going to be addressed in the next level up. But always look at this list right here and make sure you assign some work so that you know that student has at least an understanding of what that skill area is. Now, this is the blueprint that I was talking about, and you can see it has a circle graph. This happens to be the M level because it has more of them on it. Just wanted to show you that. TABEtest.com, you're going to go to resources. Then you're going to see at the very top of that drop down TABE 11-12. And in this drop down box, you're going to be able to find the blueprints. So go there and look at all the blueprints. I wanted to follow this math from E level, and you can see that it goes through D, the different, and I'll do that again so you can kind of have a better understanding. E level, all of these skills are addressed on E level. You have the standards right below it that were used to develop the test questions. On M level, you can see here again, a lot is going on in M level. So those of you that are teaching M level, probably all of you, are going to have a big challenge. But what I wanted to make clear too, and let's go to A level, same thing goes to D level. But look on A level, 28% is dealing with algebra. 28% is functions. Those two subject areas make up over half of this level. So start analyzing your circle graphs and the percentage, and you'll know where to start your curriculum, because you're going to have to take longer to deal with these two than you are with these, and especially for students that I call them rabbit, you know, students that are just with us a short time. But if you address those that are good, they're going to have more questions on when they take that post test, even if they do leave. Hopefully you're going to get an increase, even though it might be an incremental increase. Hopefully it's going to be a total level to level gain. Now let's get into what is your solution for all of this information that I've given you on TABE 11-12. A lot of moving pieces on that new test. But what Paxen Steck-Vaughn has done is a great thing, because they have addressed all of those skills in this series. So when we're talking about level M, remember all of those items that were on that circle graph for level M, and there's so many different skills to be taught. You can be assured that every skill is included as a lesson in the TABE Tutor books. So it really does target the information, targets the levels. You can see here that we have level E and M. D is not on here, but A is. So, and they're color coded too. And as we go through, I want you to see that E is orange, M is green. D is a turquoise color. It's really pretty. You'll see it in just a minute. And your A level is that purple. We do have some free resources that are on our website, and I'll give you that website in just a little bit. But there may be a time when you've got a student that only needs just a skill or two. If they do, we do have an answer as putting a pre-test in the front of the book. But if your students have just tested and you think that they're suffering from test fatigue, you might want to just go to this correlation book. Or if they just need one or two skills, you can take this, look at their individual profile sheet, see what area they need to work on, go into the correlation guide. You can see that it's color coded again. Here you have all of the reading lessons, then you work into the language, and over here into the math. So if the student wanted just one subject, you would pick that out and go to the page that it identified, and then you're going to see in the student books exactly what lesson number and lesson name they're going to have that skill addressed in. So, and then you have the standard that it was exactly like it was posted on that blueprint. I want to show you too that this is the blueprint. And you see that the standard citation, the standard description, then you have the college and career readiness level, but then this emphasis level, I haven't mentioned it, but DRC identified each skill, each standard with an emphasis level. If they deemed that standard as a high emphasis, you can be assured that your students are going to have more questions on that standard than they are from the medium and the low emphasis. Mediums will have questions taken from that standard also. Low's going to have some, maybe not any, but you know, in adult, if we skip anything, that's exactly what the students are going to find on the test, right? So don't skip any of the low emphasis, at least cover them so that if the student does have that standard on the test, it's covered. But no, remember when I was telling you that every standard you see in this background, you've got 4 standards right here from this geometry. All 4 of those standards are covered in the M level book. So this is something that I want you to feel very comfortable with, that every standard that's used to develop the TABE 11-12 test is covered in each one of our books on the appropriate level. We also, like I said, have a pre-test, and this pre-test could be for every student if you wanted it to be. We had such a demand for it that in our second printing, we've put this in there. If any of you had ordered our books prior to this printing and you don't have, we'll send it to you in a PDF. If you don't have the pretest, we'll be glad to send it to you in a PDF. So a pretest is in each one of the books, each level and each subject. And you can see that the pretest also has a test analysis chart. We'll take a closer look at that. Well, let me just go over it with you really quick. I do have another slide that has it on there, but the analysis chart is going to tell you which one of the questions, say if they missed number 8, then you could either check right here or highlight it across and know that they would need to cover this lesson. That lesson covers the skill that they missed. So from the pretest, you'll be able to get an overview of what the students need to start on. And it would be, you could use this as their curriculum guide. You could use it as their plan of instruction if you wanted to, but it's there for you. Just to cover the contents of each book, you're going to have some information about each TABE 11-12 overview, and then the specific subject that that book is addressing. So this one has TABE 11-12, everything about the reading test in 11 and 12. Then you're going to have some information, or the student's going to have the information on TABE Tutor as a book for them to use. Then they're going to have some test taking tips, and then you see the pretest. From the pretest, once they are assigned these lessons, look that they have a unit review after every series of lessons. Now, this is critical. This is very important, because you know that if a student misses something on that unit review, either they were careless, which is still just as bad as not knowing it, but it's something that you need to attend to. So don't let the students go into the next unit until you've really assessed what skills they missed in that unit review. You're going to have several checkpoints before they take that post-test. Why is that important? We do not want to start those hours over, do we? That 30, 40, and 50 hours of instruction before they can test again, it is hard. It's hard on us as instructors. It's hard on the students. So as you can, please take advantage of each one of these checkpoints so that if they do lack a skill, you can address it right when they miss it. As you see, every unit has a unit review. And then there's a full-length practice test that is identical. It's the same length. It has the same number of items that the TABE 11-12 has. So they'll get there again a chance for you to catch anything that they, any gaps they have in their curriculum. Every book will have answers, but not just answers, they're going to have explanations. You see that there's a pre-test answer sheet and a pre-test analysis chart, as well as the practice test answer sheet and practice test analysis chart. Here is the analysis chart that I wanted to show you a little bit closer. There's one of these, like I said, for the practice test and for the pre-test, all subjects and all books. And you can see that each question is listed. You could either mark it correct or incorrect, however you wanted to designate it, or I would just take a highlighter and go across it. And then the students have a good visual of what they need to do next, what they could start with, and how they need to work through this book. Now, the greatest thing, because as instructors, we know you can never have too much practice, right? So we have developed a practice book that goes with each one of the student books. So here you have level M, and it says practice on the front of it. This is reading, and I want you to know that there are 2 pages of reading. Remember, not paragraphs. They have the passages to read. 2 full pages of reading and 2 full pages of questions. So plenty of practice. So that means 4 pages of practice for every lesson in each level of your reading. When we get into the language and the math, they're going to have 2 pages because they don't have the reading pages. There are 2 full pages of practice for each of the skills. So the math was so long, it was so large that we split it into 2 books. So you have book 1 and you have book 2. And if you can see, it's really little, but you can see that for practice book 1, you've got the number series, you've got expressions and equations, the different rules, ratio and proportion relationships, so all the way down, and then you've got answers and explanations. But look after each unit, you again have different questions. These are not the same questions that were used in the book. They're all different. So after a unit, it follows the example of the student book. You're going to have a unit review. You can see down at the very end of this, there's an analysis chart for each one of those units, as well as the answers and explanations, of course. So really well done, plenty of practice. I wanted to take you very quickly just through what the lessons, the pages look like in the book. This happens to be math, and we're looking at a geometry lesson. You see right up here the lesson number and the title of the lesson is posted. Then you're going to have the standard and the emphasis posted on each lesson. And that's for those of you that have to do a lesson plan. You don't have to guess about what standards you're addressing, or if you have to do a plan of instruction. You as the instructor will have that information, the standard that's addressed, that's used to develop this lesson, and the emphasis number. Everything that's important is put in a text box so that it'll draw your students' attention to that. You're going to have an authentic TABE 11-12 test question. Now, we worked very closely with DRC to get these as close to what the student experience is on the test. Notice that we have the answer immediately following the question. You can see right here is the answer. We do not want the student to struggle with this. We want this to be, again, a learning experience for the student. So here you have the authentic TABE 11-12 question, the answer immediately following so they can use this as a practice item. And then where we can, we've had a hint or a strategy added to that so that your student can get in additional information when they encounter this type of question on TABE, their post-test, they'll know better how to answer. And then you still have practice in the textbooks. And remember, then you have those additional books that are just strictly practice. So here we have 2 standards that were so closely related that they were put into one lesson. Then you still have the text box, the authentic TABE 11-12 question, and then the hint, and then more practice. So sometimes you will see when those standards are so closely related. Here is the reading, and just to see that it follows the same format. And that's important because if your student is in reading and then they start working in math, the same format is used in all of the books. Here's a language so that you can see that information. Now, just to recap, you know that each TABE tutor book has plenty, it has the pre-test, plenty of instruction, test examples, practice items, answer keys, but not just answer keys, they have the explanation. You have practice books for each level. Each unit has a review. There's a full-length practice test at the end of every book, and they're color-coded. So the content, every standard on that blueprint is covered regardless of the emphasis level. You have high and medium emphasis standards, just like they're going to see on the post-test. Is going to be included those same emphasis levels. More items are going to be in the unit review and the practice test, depending upon whether it's high, medium, or low. The college and career readiness standard and emphasis level are cited on each lesson. And sometimes when it made sense, we put those 2 together, the 2 of the standards. And then we have that authentic TABE 11-12 test question on each level. This is our latest edition, and this is the ebook, and this is available, will be shortly, that the students can have this ebook as a textbook, and it will be in that ebook format. They'll be able to make one download on one device and be able to use that, especially in this time of virtual world, and you can't get a book to a student. Think about how great it is to have a book that's downloadable so that you can have an book on your computer. They could download it on their phone or a tablet. So the flexibility of this series is just great. Some of the free resources, I'm going to give you that address. I promised you that before, but we are going to get to it. This is, I think, one of the best things we've done is this suite of solutions. And you'll find, those of you that have used the Steck-Vaughn series before, you're going to see that it is, what we've done is to correlate each standard. Remember when we've been talking so much about geometry, here's the geometry standard, 7th grade, first standard. Here's the standard citation, or the standard description. This is the TABE associated skill to that standard. But then you have a list of all of the books and the page numbers that address that standard. So TABE Tutor series will be the first one you're going to see. You know that that's in level D, lesson 50, but then it's also found, that same standard is found in the pre-GED test preparation for math reasoning. And these are the page numbers. You can see that the complete Steck-Vaughn pre-GED test preparations included too, as is the GED series. So you have the student book, the workbook, and the complete preparation book cited, as well as that high school equivalency, which is the book, the series that we have that does not have GED on it. It's for those states that use the high set or the task. So this is, I think, a wonderful resource for you. And again, it's free of charge. You can print it off and put it in a binder, or you can print it off a page at a time, as can you do the plan of instruction. Now, you already may have a plan of instruction, but here we have one listed with the domain. And if you're not really sure about the domain citations, that's listed on a legend at the very bottom of this page. Excuse me. You have the TABE associated skills, the lesson number, and the title of the lesson. And you could put over here the date that it was assigned, or have your students put that down. The date it was assigned, the date they completed it, and the score that they made on any of the practice exercises that are associated with that lesson. So this is a plan of instruction. If you want it, it's great. This is a continuum chart. Notice that it is split between ELA and math. A couple of years ago, it was in 2017, NRS did a wonderful thing for us. They split that math level. So now we have this middle intermediate that broke up the scale scores. So we have put down for the ELA and the math separately because of that level split. We have the Steck-Vaughn, Paxen Steck-Vaughn series that addresses this specific NRS level. We have the TABE 11, 12 scale scores that address this level, and we also have the CASAS scale scores that address this level. So all that's available for you. This is a correlation for those programs that use the CASAS as an assessment. We have correlated all of the math standards in CASAS to the different TABE levels and TABE lessons. So TABE Tutor can be used. Let me say that again. TABE Tutor can be used with a CASAS score. This is the website. So go ahead and you can write that down, or just say paxenpublishing.com/resources, and you're going to be able to pull that up. So the practice test analysis charts, the plan of instruction I just showed you, that suite of solutions with all of the resources in it, the correlation guides, and then we do have a TABE 11 and 12 L level crosswalk with our fundamental skill series if you have that available in your classroom. These are our websites if you would like any more information about any of the products that I've talked about today. The website is www.paxenpublishing.com. You can also contact us if you'd like a sample or to talk with a representative. Just go ahead and contact our customer service at paxenpublishing.com. And I'll leave that up, and we're out of time. I want to ask Deanna to come back on and say a few words to close us out.
Chris, we had a lot of questions about where folks could find various things that you've talked about, and we've tried to put most of those in the chat. I also put in an email address that Paxen people could contact, but I also want to give everyone my personal email address, and I'm going to post that in the chat now. So if you had any questions that didn't get answered, or if you wanted to continue discussions about some of our material, or if you wanted to see some samples, anything like that, feel free to give me, shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'll be glad to talk with you about that. We're really excited that you joined us today. We'd love to keep this conversation going. So if you're interested, please reach out, and we'd be more than happy to do that. Chris, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation today. And to your alter ego, Christina Miller, thank you for having us at the presentation this morning. We hope y'all have a great day. I did want to mention Chris has another presentation this afternoon. It's on blended instruction. And Chris, I think that's at 12:15, if I'm not mistaken, Central Time. Yes, 12:15.
Right.
Yes, okay.
Everything we
So
do in my world is
Eastern.
on Central, but yes, you're right. Eastern Time, y'all join us this afternoon about 12:15.
Okay, 12:15 Central, 1:15 Eastern. Is that right? I think that's right.
Correct.
Okay, cool. All right, so we hope to see some of y'all later today. In the meantime, y'all have a fabulous day, and thank you. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, ladies. We really appreciate that, and we'll see you later this afternoon.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Enjoyed it.
I'm just trying to make sure.